I'm sure you're asking yourself what I've been doing this past month, and really the answer is... being in third place isn't always a bad thing. In fact, there are many advantages. For example, it can lead to experimentation, which often leads to innovation.
We would like to play.
Honey, the Mormons are here?
Close the door.
In Nintendo's case, the future seemed to have panned out pretty well for them, whereas others are repeating the same proven design every generation, still riding that initial high. It's gotten to the point where superficial arguments have broken out purely on aesthetics alone. Whether it's a new console or a control redesign, it's no surprise that this is the way they react when they are presented with something that upsets this pattern. Speaking of which, how cute is this console and controller design? There's two types of controllers. There's a controller, and then there's a controller. This one walks the line between practical and fun, which is the route Nintendo chose to go for this console generation. But I don't know, even in 2001, I don't know if you'd necessarily call this practical. Back in the day, I got a PlayStation 2, and I gotta say, that's a damn fine console. So many fun memories of playing games and watching my pirated copy of Are We There Yet? It wasn't until years later I found myself buying a refurbished GameCube at a slowly dying video game retail store for $20. Since the console was so cheap, I bought two games to go along with it, Luigi's Mansion and Super Smash Bros. Melee. This was a big deal for me because this was the first console I bought entirely by myself. The game I remember playing a lot was Luigi's Mansion, because every night I would have a terrible nightmare. For years I thought this game caused me to dream this way, but I think I was dealing with something else at the time. This is where I started gaming, in the 6th generation of consoles, and regardless of which system you were playing on, this was a great time to be a gamer. One popular game series I've always had in mind to play someday was Resident Evil, but I never got around to it because it's a horror franchise and I'm scared. Like straight up. My first experience with the franchise was on the Nintendo 3DS with Resident Evil Revelations, and for what it was a great game. As I understood it, this game was more survival horror than the console installments were at the time. After beating the game, I found myself playing Resident Evil 4. I've heard that this one was high up there on the best games of all time, so I went in with high hopes. After beating it, I can definitely agree and say this is one of the best games I've ever played. I'm currently replaying it, as you can probably tell by my unlockable costume. The game I've been playing most recently is Resident Evil GameCube Remake, which as I understand it is straight up just survival horror. I was both excited and nervous to play this game because on one hand this game is a milestone in the survival horror genre, and on the other hand I'm scared. Resident Evil on the Nintendo GameCube is a remake of the 1996 PlayStation classic. Although it wasn't the first to do the fixed camera survival horror thing, it definitely did something right, as the franchise still continues to this day, still reinventing itself in each installment. The quick summary of the story is that you play as either Jack or Jill, who worked for the Raccoon City Special Tactics and Rescue Service. You are sent with a team to investigate the case of a missing agent who disappeared when investigating reports of cannibalistic murders. Some mutated rats chase you through the woods and you run towards a mansion for security, to only find that there are mutants living there too. If there's one thing I can immediately say about Resident Evil, is it's an incredibly atmospheric game. The music is an eerie, minimalist approach that really complements the gameplay, as you need to keep an ear out for threatening noises. In the original game, the fixed camera angles were to compensate for hardware limitations, but you could hardly tell in this remake because the structure of the original game holds up surprisingly well. I'm a huge fan of the fixed camera angles, as it can be used to highlight objects in an environment in a clever way. A long empty hallway never looks so terrifying. This is definitely the scariest game I've played thus far. Like in many zombie mediums, there are two ways to kill a zombie, by either removing the head or burning the body. So I suggest either going for headshots or burning the body after you temporarily kill it. To light a dead body on fire, you need a lighter, and not only that, you need kerosene. Keep in mind that the kerosene can be found in gas tanks throughout the mansion, but there's only a finite amount, and that's the name of the game. Ammunition, health, the ability to save, it all has a limit. Near the first half of my playthrough, I found myself out of ink ribbons, which is an item you need to save in typewriters. I was stuck in a position where I needed to beat a boss, to find an item, to open a thing, to fight another boss, to only get another item to open more doors. All throughout, I could not find a single ink ribbon. I had to get through all of that and die multiple times, trial and error, getting a little further than I did last time, until I found myself in a cabin with a typewriter. There's no ink ribbon here. I check everywhere. And I leave, but this triggers another boss encounter. This isn't really a problem, I still have ammo on my grenade launcher, but it doesn't work. It wasn't until my second attempt I read online that you weren't even supposed to beat this boss. You should just get the key item and get out of there. How was I supposed to know that? It was during this cycle of trial and error where I found the game less and less scary. I became more comfortable and remembered which rooms were where and found the best strategies to make it from point A to point B. At the snake boss, I found out if you just chill next to Richard, you don't need to waste a single bullet. Just let him do all the work while you wait for the scripted moments, where you gotta take matters into your own hands. The point is, when new players find themselves in a similar situation, they start to notice and take advantage of these exploits. I was legitimately filled with anxiety when this cutscene initially popped off, but it lost all of its intended effect on me after the second time, and you can't even skip this cutscene. The criticism I found most prominent in these early Resident Evil games were its tank controls. If you're familiar with these early Resident Evil games, you might think I'm beating a dead horse, but to new players this might be the biggest hurdle to get through. Basically, you move in 4 directions, and to change your angle, you have to stop and face the direction. In a game that features numerous narrow halls and rooms filled with zombies, making precise movements is a necessity, and tank controls only exacerbate things.
What does exacerbate mean?
It means, to make things worse.
Right.
According to the game I've been playing for, and I'm still not used to these controls. These controls really show the game's age because other than that, everything else is great. If you're thinking about getting into survival horror, I would recommend starting with Resident Evil 4. I personally would recommend the Wii version, but whatever is accessible to you should be fine. The other game I've been playing is Pikmin 2. This is a real-time strategy game, meaning that instead of taking turns like any other strategy game, everything you do is in real time. This means you're able to freely multitask to complete objectives. The game has a really open-ended nature that allows you to explore and even rewards you for it. As someone who had absolutely zero interest in the genre, I gotta say Pikmin is the perfect entry point. It's got that Nintendo trademark of being super fun and easy to understand, but gets more enriching as you go on. All you need to know is you play as either Olimar or Louis, 2 captains who are sent to a very familiar planet to collect materials they can sell to get their company out of debt. This planet is home to these creatures known as Pikmin. Depending on their color, they have abilities unique to them. For example, red is immune to fire, white is immune to poison, yellow can be thrown at high distances and is immune to electricity, blues can breathe underwater, and purples are heavy and pack heavy damage. The Pikmin franchise started off as a tech demo, showcasing how many 3D objects can be on screen. This eventually translated itself into the Pikmin we know today. You can have up to 100 Pikmin on you, and it's never a problem for the GameCube to handle. No slowdowns or visual compromises. The game looks very good, and like Resident Evil, the aesthetics are really impressive and hold up very well today. Unlike Resident Evil, Pikmin is so bright and colorful. You visit different areas on the planet that effectively mimic different seasons. It's beautiful. The treasures you collect in the game are really neat too. You find clever callbacks or even product placements. In the context of the game's world, it makes a lot of sense why you would find these here. When your Pikmin carry one item back to the ship, your ship's computer will come up with a cute name and describe the foreign object. In the first game, you crash land on the planet and use the Pikmin to help you repair your damaged ship in under 30 days before you run out of oxygen. In the sequel, take all the time you need. It's not like the debt collectors will break your boss's knees or anything. The second game has an emphasis on exploring dungeons. Each one has its own distinct theme and enemies. Outside, you have to worry about the day time limit, but down here, it's more relaxed. Although admittedly, you can get into some tough situations where one mistake can cost the lives of dozens of Pikmin, and before you know it, you feel like a war criminal. If you're like me and real-time strategy games look a little too complex to want to take the time to learn, then I highly recommend checking out Pikmin. Every installment has something great to offer, except for that one. I can't co-sign that one.
赤ピクミンは火に強い青ピクミンは溺れない黄ピクミンは高く飛ぶ紫ピクミン力持ち白ピクミンには毒がある
said with mustard.